How many of you are familiar with Robert Linkul? If you're not, you will want to be after this hour with him. I became familiar with him because he was super annoying. So as you can imagine as an editor, right, you get pitches and you get people emailing you all the time with their great ideas of what they want to write about. And I started getting emails from this Robert Linkul. And he just kept emailing and emailing, very respectfully. He was always complimentary. And, you know, there's that fine line between, like, persistence and perseverance and annoyance. And he always was, like, right on the line. However, I will say, I said, you know, sometimes in those moments where you're like, this guy, I learned a lesson of perseverance because I finally was like, let me just give this guy, okay, fine, write something. It was brilliant. We've created a great friendship, both professionally and personally. I've watched what he's done, and you can read his bio in terms of, you know, his involvement with the NSCA, his facility, Be Stronger Fitness in California. If you don't follow him on Facebook, follow him. You can see what he's doing from a social media standpoint, how he's working with his clients, how he's creating an experience. We can learn a lot, and also his commitment to really up-leveling the industry through other professionals, doing a lot of professional development for up-and-coming fitness professionals as well as those who have been in the industry. So I'm excited that he's here. He's doing this, he's got his boots on the ground, doing this in a way that I think is really inspiring and a lot of things for us to take away. He's not annoying, he's one of the most amazing people that you will meet. But it's a lesson in perseverance. Without further ado, Mr. Robert Linkul.
Awesome. What an introduction. Thank you very much. I am going to do my best to have you all hear me. 2 days ago, I couldn't really speak much at all. I've been battling this head cold. So please excuse me if I clear my throat or if I cough at all as we go through this. I've never had walk-up music. That was the coolest thing. So I want to say thank you so much to Austin and to our hosts, Cody and Dan and this whole team. I mean, I've run events before, and to put these on is so much work. So a round of applause for them, please. Such a great job, such a great job. All right, I have a ton of information that I'm gonna run through here with you because I wanna give you all of it, okay? If you want more stuff afterwards, if I don't have time to cover everything, hop on my YouTube, send me an email, I give it all out. So feel free to hop on there. I'll get through as much as we can. If you have any questions, hang around afterwards, okay? So my first question to all of you, how many of you have a philosophy in how you train, how you program? Okay, so like half the room. The other half of the room, you just kind of make up stuff as you go along. It's okay to say that. Like, I'm not bagging on you, okay? So those of you that have a philosophy, how many of you have taken that out of your head and put it on paper? And you have it written down. There's 2 of us, 3 of us? Okay, all right, so 4, very good, Dina. All right, so what I'm hoping is not that you see mine and say, like, I want to do that, I'm just going to use that one. My design and my philosophy has been built for my people in California, in my gym, the way that I like to train. But what I'd like to do is to inspire into you, hopefully, how can you take all the things that you do, all the things in your mind that maybe you haven't put on paper yet, and create something like this, okay? So I don't want you to just copy it. I want it to inspire you, hopefully, to get to something like this, okay? So when we talk about loaded transfers, our facility, our average age client is 63 years old, okay? I see about 80 clients a week. We're semi-private, small group training facility, anywhere from 6 to 8 people every hour. Every single one of our clients has an injury. I'm not gonna say like, oh, a tweaked knee, like they've all had a surgery, they all have something broken on them, okay? Every single one of them. I do upwards of about 150 to 160 sessions a week, and that's all from 4 a.m. until 10 a.m. So I pack people in small little groups, all designed specific to what their training purpose is, and not their goal, what their training purpose is, and based on whatever their physical limitation is. So I make little teams, like a football team and a soccer team, but I make a group of individuals that all have back issues, or endurance athletes that all have torn up knees, right? So we make little teams of them as we go through. And one of our biggest priorities as we train them is to be able to build strength and build ability in them to perform a loaded transfer. That is our biggest focus, okay? A loaded transfer in the medical field means to help somebody get out of bed and move to another chair. For us, it's to go to the car, get the groceries, transfer them into the house, put them down. To grab my grandkid, pick them up, take them over, put them in the chair, right? We do hundreds of loaded transfers a day, from our car keys to our groceries to TVs to bags of potting soil, whatever it is, right? We do them all the time. So our intention is to build our people to a point where they're capable of doing those things on a daily basis without hurting themselves and under the performance that they want to be able to do, okay? More information, I have a ton of articles. I don't have a membership fee or anything. It's all free. So if you want stuff, just hit me up afterwards and I'll send it all to you. This is an article I wrote. This is actually my last one that I did. For 5 years, I wrote a column for the Personal Trainer Quarterly, all career development based. And my last one, I said, hey, I want to do a program one. So everything that I'm talking about today is in this 6-page article. NSCA member or not, I can send it to you. So if you would like it, please let me know. I'll send it over. All right, in our 2,500 square foot training facility, we take a strategy session where we sit down with a client, collect all their data, collect all their information, and we observe a movement pattern assessment, if you will. It hasn't been clinically researched, none of that. It's just something that I've created to work with my clients where I can get a little bit of data from them and see how they move, okay? And that's a whole nother talking, and I can discuss that later. We take that information plus the challenge of their biological aging versus their chronological aging, and that's how we select our groups. So what I mean by that, chronologically, a 50-year-old becomes a 55-year-old and then a 60-year-old. But training-wise, okay, biologically, they may not be at the same level. So I'm gonna look at individuals as data to collect and then place them where I want. Okay, if all you wanted was a cell phone that made phone calls and sent text messages, you buy a flip phone, but you don't. You want something personalized, you want it designed, you want to tailor it, you want to put your photos in it, you want to mold it exactly the way that you want it. So you spend $800 on a smartphone, right? So we want to take and just plug people into wherever they want to train. I want to plug them into where they belong, to what I can customize for them. It's got to be specific, okay? How can we get as personalized personal training built into a semi-private model as possible? And that's really what we tailor down. We limit machines, and you'll see in all these videos, we don't have machines at all. We have airdyne bikes, we have rowing machines, that's it. We use pulleys, we use bands, tons of bands. I love progressive resistance, but that is all. Okay, we have individuals, clients that need machine-based. We refer them to another facility until they're ready to come to us. Work really closely with a physical therapist that helps us get our people ready to go. We see most of our clients 2 to 3 days a week, mostly 60 minutes each time. So out of 168 hours, I get them for 2. And I have to be as efficient as I possibly can with that time. So sitting on a machine and pushing and pulling on a plane that they don't have to balance, they don't have to coordinate, it's just not that valuable to me, okay? So that's part of my philosophy. 6 components, we call our pillars of strength, our 6 pillars our 6 components are our pillars that we work on. We're gonna go through 3 of those today, but that's really the basic component of every single workout we put together, okay? And that's the blueprint that I'll refer to. Our secret, you see down here, based on their physical limitation and their training purpose, it's to keep their end goal in mind. And as trainers, this becomes the hard part for us, because our ego and our mindset says, I'm really into blank implements right now. Bodyweight training, kettlebells, Viper, whatever the implement might be. And these are all good implements, but they're tools. They're not a style of training, okay? So we have to take our mind out of that and say, what do they need? Not what do we want them to do, right? We have to select the things that are most appropriate to them. And that can be the challenge, okay? Especially with older pops. So why do I train older people? When I was 20 years old until 2000, I'll let you listen to this really quick. It's not terribly loud, but this is a video of a video because I didn't have a VHS converter. So I was a hammer thrower. I threw for Reebok, I was sponsored, I was ranked 14th in the US, and my best throw was 64.85, basically 212 feet, 7 inches. I needed 7 more inches to qualify for nationals. So this was the end of 2004. I continued throwing until 2006, training my way up. In Olympic sports like this, you have the opportunity to train for Olympic years and have bids. You have a 4-year bid, basically. So this was my 4-year bid. I was building everything up. And in January 1st of 2008, my Olympic year, My wife was working at this country club, and she goes, hey, I have the keys to the joint. I can open up early. We just redid our entire facility. You have brand new plates, a brand new squat rack. Come on in, you'll be the first person to ever squat in this rack. And I was a squatter, okay, 225 pounds. I could back squat 550, fairly strong for a guy my size. So I said, yeah, I want to do that. I want to be the first one. So she sneaks me in 2 hours before they open. I run down there. I'm warming up. I have 225 on my back. I go down into my squat, and I feel my L5 S1 rupture laterally in my back. And I can feel it squirt out. And immediately I know I'm hurt. But the iron-minded geek that I am, I said, do not drop these plates. They're brand new. So I force myself up out of the squat. I rack the bar. I fall down on the ground. And for 2 hours, I lay there. I can't move. And my wife's like, man, he's getting after it. He's been down there forever. And finally, she lets somebody in. And they come down and they help me get up. And I'm doing my walk. I've thrown my back out 100 times at this point. So I walk up there. I'm like, I hurt myself. She goes, you know what to do. Get home, get your eyes, get your feet up. She lets me drive home in that condition. And I get home, and 72 hours later, 0 sleep. I cannot get comfortable. I have emergency surgery on my back to fix this ruptured disc. So that was 2008. 2009 comes along. I rehabilitate. I climb Mount Rainier. I think, okay, maybe my hammer throwing career is done. Maybe I'll go on and be a mountaineer. I was training a guy to climb Mount Everest. So I said, I got to go do this. I got to see what it's like. So I climb Mount Rainier. I have Shasta and Whitney and Denali, all these great trips lined up. 2009, I developed a carcinoid tumor in my lung that had been there for 9 years, so lung cancer. I eventually have a surgery to have that removed. That's this picture here. So my lung, half of it was removed. It had since grown down. These are staples and all my funky broken ribs and all this that are still in there. 2009 comes along. They're doing an x-ray in my chest. They find a tumor in my thyroid, so my thyroid is then cut out. I'm pretty good for about 4 years. Nothing's going on too bad. 2014 comes along, and from years of throwing exactly in the same direction in the discus and in the hammer and in the shot put, I had worn my hips to a point where both of my labrums were completely shot. So I had arthroscopies both to clean up. That lasted about a year. Eventually, 2016, ended up having hip replacements. My right one rehabbed great. My left one, not so great. On day 2, it dislocates and pops out. If you've ever dislocated something, I hope you never experience it, but it's awful. They put it back in. I go to get up. It pops out again. They put it back in. I go to get transferred to the bed. It pops out again. They put it back in. They let me wait a few hours. They go to get me out to my car. It pops out again. So at this point, they say, all right, I think we're going to stop. and I'm like, thank you. This one guy's like, no, you just got to be tough. Come on. And I'm like, you walk on one leg that's sticking out. So they go in and they're like, it's not dislocated. And they x-ray and this pops up. And I'm like, I told you. Should have bet on that. Anyway, so that comes up. Eventually the next day, I got another hip replacement. I had wrist surgeries. I had to basically relearn how to kind of walk again and go through this whole process. So basically, I am an old person, is the way that I look at this. So these are my hips. My daughter, who's like 3 at the time, is up here running around, and she's like, come on, Daddy, what's wrong with you? You know? So I'm learning how to do all this again, and as I'm doing it, I'm such a geek. I'm like, I gotta learn about all of this. And so I'm going through and learning and researching as much as I can about all of it. And by no means am I a hip expert, but I've had personal experience with this. I've had personal experience with pretty major surgeries, okay, with having to rehabilitate myself multiple times, going through with different abilities and non-abilities, like having wrist surgery on your right hand, which is your wiping hand, excuse me for going to that point, but trying to figure that out, trying to figure out how I'm gonna write, how I'm gonna eat, all of these processes. And along the way, at no point did I market myself as an older adult specialist, but people heard my story, they heard my experience, and they started telling their grandparents about it. And the next thing I know, I've got all these old people coming in. And so that became the majority of our demographics from my personal experiences, but also my desire to want to learn as much as I could about it. So my daughter gets this Lego kit, and she has this little guy on here, and she's playing with it, and I'm like, oh, isn't that cute? Now, 2 minutes later, she comes back. She's like, look, Daddy, it's you. She took the skateboarder's head and put it on the old man. And then one of my personal trainers gave me this one. I don't know if you can see that. It's the Tin Man doing yoga, and he says, this is bullshit on there. So that's kind of how I feel as I go through all my movements in my day. I am an old man. I'm the oldest 37-year-old you'll probably ever meet. But I embrace it. I love it. I'm a big believer of Life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. These are experiences that you get to take in. My self-quote that I put up there, sometimes your specialty will select you. We just have to recognize these things and accept them, understand they're happening for a reason, they're happening for us. So these are our 6 pillars, okay? Again, I'm only gonna talk about 3 of these. So I'll explain a couple of these as we go. We have our basic ADLs. I think everybody knows those pretty well. So we invented the ADL pluses, okay? So working on our sit to stands, up and down stairs, up and down off the floor, reaching and rowing overhead, being able to properly hinge or pick things up and then properly load and transfer. So based on these components, we want all of our clients to be able to do these, obviously, all of them to be able to work in here, and we use these components to address each of those as we go down, okay? So again, we're just gonna do like half of these as we go through. So our goal with the loaded transfer, number 1 is properly learning how to pick something up. So we call it a hinged squat. So the rest of the world thinks of squatting, non-personal trainers, as being as upright as they can and using their knees. So we really want people to learn how to displace their hips first, okay? This is Susan here. She weighs about 140 pounds, and she's picking up 140 pounds, which was a big deal for us, for somebody 75 years old. So we teach the hinge in a way where we want them to basically RDL first, learn how to displace their hips first. So we say 80% of our hinge squat comes from the hip, and then the last 20% comes from our knees. And we'll get them as low as they possibly can. Our transfers can come in all kinds of different ways, and I'm gonna show a bunch of those for you. You saw Wes doing one of our drags there. And then to replace the weight, or put it back to wherever you had. It might be overhead, taking books from the floor, transferring them, putting them overhead, okay? Grabbing weights from the shelf, taking them over, putting them on the floor. It just depends on where we're gonna have people place things, what kind of cues we're gonna give them to work on vertical components to make sure they're getting their arms in the right spot, their bodies into the right spot, okay? So I'm gonna kind of turn and burn through quite a few exercises as we go through this, but we break it up into those 3 components: the proper hinge, the transfer, the proper replacement, okay? This is a little breakdown of each one as we'll go through. Some of your more simple hinge exercises to a little bit more advanced to very advanced. These are not in specific order of this is the easiest and then the next and then the next. They're just easier on this side, okay? And more complex at that end. Again, it's very specific for clients as we go. 8 out of 10 older adults talk about this quite a bit. Again, everybody in this room probably knows quite a bit about that. We're gonna experience back pain. 90% of that they'll fix with physical therapy. 60, 80, it'll take them 2 years or so, and about 7%, maybe a little bit over, they're gonna have that chronic lower back pain forever. Big issues that come in, why this occurs. They stand improperly, they sit too long or too improperly. They really have very poor squatting, deadlifting, or picking up techniques, which is one of the biggest issues for us to address. And that's kind of the major point of what brings us to the hinge. So when I start talking about hinges, anybody training older adults, the first question becomes, how do I get them on the floor if they can't get to the floor now? During our movement observation, we ask them, number 1, are you comfortable attempting to get down to the floor? If the answer is no, that's okay. I know what to do with them, okay? We will do as you see here, we'll bring the floor up to them. So we, if you've seen these, instead of wood plyo boxes, we have these nice padded ones. They are extremely expensive. We had like $60 plyo boxes, and I get 4 of them for like $300, or we paid $1,800 for these 2. They're really expensive, but valuable. If somebody's doing step-ups, we're not huge on box jumps, but if somebody's doing those and they fall, they're not slicing skin off their legs. They're just bumping into these pads and hopefully landing semi-softly. But we'll take this up to 24 inches. And once a client can basically 24 inches to kind of lean back on it and their abilities start to improve, then we'll take it down to 18 inches and then down to 12 inches. And eventually at 6 inches, they just use it as an assistance to get to the floor then, to get up and down. So once we build abilities for them where they can get there, we teach them a basic, bless you, we teach them a basic glute bridge from here. Shirley's 75 years old, hip replacement, knee replacement. And then Joan had a stroke 4 years ago. We can even start to load these as we go along. Hinges progressing from here. Floor hinge, we're adding load. This is one of my favorite exercises here. This is just a super band, okay? You get from Rogue or Perform Better, whoever you got them from. And we put them onto the racks. We put little towels underneath here and make sure that it doesn't wear out with the metal on the rubber. But we allow them to get into a position, again, practicing our up and down off the floor, sliding their body into position. I call this manipulation strength, okay? Not a widely known term, I just kind of named it that. And the way that I found that was after dislocating my hip and waking up from that second surgery, they had me in the middle of this very large hospital bed, which most of us think of like hospital beds. They put me in, like you're hurt and you're a big guy and we don't want you to roll off the bed, I guess. So they put me in this huge bed and they said, okay, we got to get up. And so I'm looking at, 18 inches of gap. And I'm thinking, when you guys rolled me over last time, it dislocated. So I'm scared to death to even move, right? Like I'm move my butt and I move my shoulders and I move my butt and I'm kind of slinking my way across the end. And I'm thinking, other people have to experience this. How do they get in and out of the car? How do they get up and down off the toilet? How do they get up and down from their recliner? The recliner was like a death sentence for me. Ours, it looks like 90 degrees and then you sit it and you're like, you like melt into it, right? So once I got down there, I'm like, I can't get out of this thing. We had to call my brother and people to come help me get out. And so these positions, not necessarily sit to stands or get up off the floor, but just manipulating your body in and out of bed, in and out of the car. So we have components that address that, okay? So this is a good one. You get them on the floor, you get them down in position, you let them bridge away. Notice their feet are elevated too. I love hitting a bigger range of motion if they're capable. And then eventually we load it. So same thing, get on the floor, roll the bar into position. We go through all our steps, teach them how to brace that weight, get it in position, and then bridge up. Lori's the youngest person you're gonna see in our videos here. I think she's 48. Everybody else is upper 60s, lower 70s. We do train wide varieties of clients, which is kind of cool because we had most of the 40 and 50-year-olds. Then we got all their grandparents and then all the grandkids. So we started a youth program where almost every person we have, they have at least one family member training with us. So we're pretty family-oriented. Along with my wife and my 2 girls that come in, we're very family-based. So then we take them from the floor and having their feet elevated to elevating their shoulders. This is the Breck-Contreras hip thrust. We also do them on open benches. Open benches, once you know a client is capable of doing this, then you can let them do this. Some of the things that I'm recording are with clients that have done this a million times, so I know he's not gonna just pummel over on his first one. But when we teach this, I stand on the edge of the bench and I hold it in place while he's learning how to bridge. And then eventually he gets to the point where bridging up, the bench will not move. But most people bridge quad dominant. So they're pushing, even on the floor, they're pushing with their quads so much, they're basically trying to stand up on the floor. So if you continue to let them bridge quad dominant, they'll start sliding across, right? So now if we elevate them into a bridge position without the bench being anchored, they're going over. So you gotta be really careful when you introduce this. But it's a great teaching tool to teach people how to bridge upward. So eventually, once we got Richard to the point where he was getting it and he was understanding here, then we were able to bump him over to this guy and put the band on here. So this is kind of a default if you don't have one of these guys, but I recommend you use one of these. So Bill gets into a position, sits on the floor, takes the band up and over. Progressive resistance, great for individuals like myself with a hip replacement because you can control it the whole way. You know at the top if there's too much pressure being put on you, you can come back and pick a different band. Where 45 pounds on my hip is always 45 pounds for the most part, okay? So I'm a big fan of progressive load. And then Richard demoing here, just learning how to unlock his pelvis and bridge back up. He's our oldest client at 85. And a couple videos later on of him, could barely even move when we first started. Now he can do lunges and so on. All right, one of our biggest helps, our biggest tools, I guess we'd say we use a lot, is taking clients that cannot take a vertical load-based hinge, so an RDL or a deadlift, and teach them how to unlock their hips and teach them how to perform a hip hinge in the standing position. Once we progress them off the floor and we're ready to stand, but they're not ready for this due to lower back injuries, we can deload them. So we take one of the bands, loop it up and over the bar at the top, and we call this a hands in pocket position. We have bands upwards of 100 pounds and all the way down to as low as 10 pounds. So if I'm easy math 200, which I'm not, like 250. If I'm up at 200 pounds and I take a 100-pound band up and over and I'm bracing down, I'm able to displace my hips and hinge into a position while bracing and pushing downward. That band is kicking in and deloading me as I hinge. It's also creating a traction as I push down. It's allowing my back to basically separate a little bit against that pressure. So they get to a deeper position than they're capable of doing standing, reduction of pain and so forth, but it's a pretty safe position for them to get into. Again, physical therapy has to clear it and sign them off for them to do this, but this is kind of a bridge tool for us. Some of our clients we nickname tight asses because that's exactly what they are. They don't move their butts. So a good teaching tool we use for that is we put the band on around their hips with a bar And here's Craig, just super hamstring. He's got 2 bad knees. So part of his protection of his knees is just not to unlock them and he does everything from his lumbar spine or from his waist instead of from his hips. So we'll put that band around him, have him walk forward, and let the bar displace him, let the bar pull him back. And the first couple times they do it, it pulls them off balance and they fall backwards. And then they start to get the idea of displacing their hips. We call it cheeks up or butt up or tailbone, chest up. Jay Dawes describes it as mooning somebody, okay, in the position to learn how to stick your butt up. Whatever cue you want to use with them. The file cabinet drawer is open, shut it, right? Whatever you want to use with them to get the idea that they need to displace their hips first. Big key component for us there. Then we're ready to start loading. So you'll notice in this first one, we have 3 different ladies doing their RDLs here. We have hecklers in the background that start to wave and hoop and holler at me in a second. But all 3 of these ladies could not perform loaded hinges when we started. We took them through these basic progressions, and now we're getting to a position where they're not just doing RDLs, they're doing what we call a rack pull. So we have a little, shrug that we start to add at the top, which incorporates the upper half, the traps, okay, levator scapulae, so on, okay, all the way up in there. And we have ladies that are 130, 140 pounds, pulling 150, 175, 200 pounds. These are people in their 60s and 70s, but they've been training with me for 14 years, 12 years, 14 years. So this one over here was my very first client ever. Wes is our youngest guy in the group, and he's been with me for 2 years. Gary on this side, back injury, 2 bad knees, shoulder injury. He was a golfer and tennis and hiking, and he's really tore up his body, but moving really well. We will also control the range of motion. Notice he's in the rack here. We take away the exposed position. Exposed meaning the most vulnerable position, which they're probably going to hurt themselves. So for the majority of our clients, it's kneecap or lower. So we'll put them in the rack, go through all the progressions at this point, and we will control the range of motion where when the bar gets to knee height, or when they're about to get to that position where they're going to round out or start to default to their back, the rack stops the bar and says, you cannot go any further than this, right? And as they get better and more capable, we can lower those racks. You can do this in regular bars, like regular hook on the bar. You just have to be close into the bar. You get these little racks that stick out on here. They're a good help too, okay? Then we are able to move up to a couple different ones here. Again, hinge with a bent knee. This is Mary Beth here on the right. I'll tell about her first. She was in a position scared to death of hurting herself with a squat. Every time I pick up something, I hurt myself. So we started very small, all of our bracing on the floor, eventually working up to light kettlebells, heavier kettlebells. We went from a 65-pound kettlebell to a 75-pound bar. So 7 pounds, 8 pounds of a jump. And she was petrified to get into this thing. And I said, just listen to the weight. It's only 7 pounds. And she stood inside, center of mass training. I love these. If you haven't worked with fat bells or Thompson bells, go around your hands. Same idea, you're in the center of the weight. Getting these are $150, $200 for one of these guys. But getting them to the point where they're inside the weight, they feel very secure. Another one that we do here with Joan. Joan was the one that had the stroke. So she has a lot of gait issues. She's like a top. She's constantly in this small little step because she's worried about falling over. Well, with tops, as soon as they start to get out of balance, they're going down hard. So we're working with her on keeping her feet wider, with taking bigger steps, with getting outside her normal range of motion. But we're forcing that by putting these plates down here for her. Each plate, as she gets tired, gets a little higher. So she's working up the steps. She's practicing her hinge squat position, her progression with the weight, her setting it back down. So she's doing little transfers over and over again. But as she gets tired, it gets easier as the height comes up, okay? Just giving you a lot of different options of what we'll work on. So Mary Beth, as she comes down, feeling confident. My favorite part's at the very end. She looks at me like, oh, that wasn't that bad. But she's got a 55-pound bar with 10s on each side, working up to 75 pounds, feeling strong as she goes here. Still does this to this day. We're up to about 80, 85 pounds. But again, it's been 3 years of training her to get her to this point. I think one of the biggest concerns I have, or one of the, I call them common practice, okay? Common practice, in my opinion, has a negative tone to it. Because what this means in our industry is that older people don't lift heavy weights. Older people don't put their arms over their head. Older people have to sit down when they train. Older people lift pink weights. Older people have to be careful with everything that they do. As with everything else, with anyone else, 12 years old, 25 years old, 65 years old, it's about proper programming and proper cueing and proper coaching. I don't care what your ability level is. I don't care what your age is. You have to teach them correctly. And if you do that, they can progress to the next step. At some point, it's like, okay, we're strong enough. She doesn't need to deadlift 225. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to get the 2 plates on each side. But what I want her to feel confident doing is this. She's the lady that hurt herself pulling her yard waste trash can down the yard. So tipping these weights, moving these weights, working in her yard, it's got to apply to her life. We can do that by picking up these loads. So I want people to step outside the mindset of common practice. Okay? As long as you're capable of coaching people well and progressing them well, they can do this. Okay? Hinge Progressions, I want to put this up here for you. Basically everything we just went through, okay? So I wanted to include that in so you could have a copy of that. All right, moving on to our loaded carries. Again, same idea, easier, a little harder, the hardest as we come along. Loaded carries are great because they work on a lot of different components. Increase overall body strength, carrying load. We do this often through our day. Develop and improve posture muscles. Reducing anterior dominance, teaching people to stand tall. And I'm going to show you the difference between walking and carrying here in just a second, okay? Core strength definitely works on our posture. There's a huge relationship between increased grip strength and overall body strength. So we're working on getting people stronger from a grip strength component. Floor-based activity as well decreases their ability, develops their ability to get up and down off the floor without assistance, either holding on to something or band assisted as they go. Their manipulation strength starts to improve, just having to pick up and move weights around where they're at. And then as we talked about glute strength development, as we saw with some of the demos earlier with our last speaker, it was fantastic, by the way. I was really impressed with that glute activation. I'm going to steal that one. But getting the glute activation to pick these weights up and down, basically the backside of the body is a huge focus. So this is an example of walking. Notice they're taking pretty regular strides, kind of lumbering from side to side. There's a little bounce from up and down. Their hips are shifting all over the place. This was an example of what we should not do. This is walking with a weight, okay? What we want them to do is stride along. This is a front and back carry. Notice how smooth he is, even when he has to stop and wait for someone to go, and then continue. It's a slightly smaller stride, just a little bit smaller gait, still hips, a little bit faster than he would normally move. Basically, I tell people, pretend you're carrying 2 buckets of water filled to the brim, that if you bounce or sway or lumber, it's going to spill. So you're walking on glass, you're walking on ice, you're moving quickly, okay? Another analogy is when we were kids, we'd do a rocket position. We'd lock our arms down tight, and our dad or whoever would grab our hands behind and try to pick us up out of the pool or off the ground. Same bracing position. You're going to get shot out of a cannon. You're not going to stand. You want to get tight and be ready, prepare for the weight as we come up. I want to combine feel their arms and feel their muscles and feel their engagement as they come along. So minimal momentum, side to side, they transition, they shift. They have people escalators like the airport. They're just gliding along, okay? That's our focus there. Typical carrying positions and distances. We have 3 different positions you can carry from. The easiest is at the hip. A little bit harder is at the shoulder. Hardest position would be overhead. We call a fister carry. Phil Pfister is famous for winning the World Strongman with this great performance where he hoisted this weight over his head and basically ran ahead of everybody else. So we've nicknamed it after him, okay? Combinations and varieties of each one. You can do a suitcase carry and a waiter carry and so on. I'll show you a lot of those as we go. Distances can range anywhere from 50 meters to 300 meters, 600 meters, as far as you want to carry people, as long as they're moving smoothly. That's with all these I'm going to show you. Slightly small steps compared to their regular gait. Anti-shrug, shoulders back and down. I say put your scapula in your back pocket. Okay, so we want them to anti-shrug as they come down. They're ready, they're braced, ready to hit that position. Slight elbow flexion. Okay, show me your muscles, and then keep that neutral chin in position. Okay, you also see anybody with long hair, you'll see their hair bobbling up and down, their Jan Brady ponytail going back and forth in the back. You'll know they're swaying or lumbering somewhere. Okay, so a couple of these we like to do. I love serpentines. This is me getting the groceries out of the car, walking around the other car in the garage, coming into the living room, going around and up the steps, moving into the kitchen, dodging a kid, and putting the weight back on the counter, okay? So these positions, we can simulate walking around posts, in and out of positions. We want them to keep tight as they're carrying so the weights don't clip them as they go. You'll know right away if it's rubbing on them that you're not having them carry in the right position. They're not tight on the upper half. Lurching or lunging with the weight, you'll see them lunge forward and back. Same with sleds or prowlers as they push. You want a one smooth, consistent effort all the way through. You'll notice this is going to stay the same on every one of these slides. Kettlebells, dumbbells, fat bells, sandbags, any implements you want to carry. Change of direction works on coordination, core activation, your thumbs on this one in particular. A lot of times if you have arthritis or issues with the wrist, they will just do a little unhooked grip, or we call a false grip. This does not work on proper grip strength use. Your thumb, I don't know the exact percentage, but your thumb is, I think it's upward of half of your proper grip strength. So you really need to incorporate that as best as the client can. Goblet squat. This is one of the most famous Facebook posts I've ever put up. So Bill, the little guy, is not happy about having to compete against these taller competitors because older people aren't competitive, right? They just want to sit down and train. So we're supposed to be doing 5 sit-to-stands, then a 25-foot carry and back, and then 6, and then so on. Well, Bill decides, since I'm vertically challenged, I'm only going to do 5 of these and take off. And this guy goes, "You cheating bastard," is what he says right here. And so I nicknamed it the Cheating Bastards, and it just took off. I've never had such response from people before. But I really like to show this to show how competitive older pops can be, that they do want to train, they do want to push hard, but you got to make sure they're ready to do so before you start pushing them. We call this a kung fu grip. These are the fat bells. One hand goes into the bell, the other hand goes over the top. Okay, so they're in their kung fu grip. This gives you about 60% of the load on one side, whatever hand's in there. So we'll give them a prop hand, dominant arm, be able to work on some unilateral strength as we go. Notice the taller guy who doesn't squat so well. He's got a couple of those pads down in his chair, so we can adjust and personalize their heights as they want. The chairs are anchored on the back side. I have black sandbags down here. I don't know if you can see those, just to make sure they're not going to pump away as they squat up and down. Okay. So kung fu grip, goblet, zercher, wherever you want to carry the weights, just make sure they're engaged, they're not resting on them. Okay, minimize lurching, swaying, bouncing, as we talked about before. All right, suitcase carries. This one is fairly simple to see when somebody's doing it wrong. Number 1, the weight will hit them. Number 2, they will no longer be vertical. They will counter the weight to try to upright, because the weight is going to pull them to the dominant side. I like to start with their dominant hand, okay? So I consider the dominant hand the more coordinated or the smarter hand, but it's not your stronger hand on most people, okay? And what I mean by that is when you're carrying the groceries and you have 2 in each hand and you get to the door and you're right-handed, what do? You put all 4 of them in one hand and you're digging out your keys, right? And you get the keys and you stop the dog and you kick the dog and close the door and you bolt that back up and then you shift it back. So when you get in this position, you take all the load that you have and you put it into your dumber arm. It's stronger, just not as coordinated, okay? So I want to get, while they're fresh, I want to get the less strong arm, the coordinated arm done first to allow them to address that strength issue. Because even though it's more coordinated, it needs more work. As the body gets tired, less effort comes out. So I want to address the biggest issue. Typically, this is what we see. So we'll carry that position. They'll do their dominant or their non-dominant arm, their stronger arm on the way back. I have a lot of people comment, it's not very safe to have people running and doing carries up here. What if they get hit by the door? We specifically picked this location because we're open from 4 until 10. And none of these shops open until 10. So we have the run of the parking lot. You'll see us pulling sleds and throwing sandballs. There's nobody else there but us. Okay? Yoga opens at like 9:45. So right towards the end of the day, we are safe here. Okay? Squared strong positions here, sandbag, sling, and carry. This is one of my faves. A lot of our clients have dogs. A lot of our clients are ranchers. So they do a lot of horse feed and pig feed and whatever else they have that they sling around. So that inspired some of these for us. We have a client that is a dog breeder, and she's got all these dogs, and she gets her, 2 35-pound bags of food and hoists them up under her shoulder, carries them up, slaps her cart down. They say, "Do you want help?" And she goes, "No, I got it," and puts her stuff in and carries them away. And it's those kind of stories that make me really proud that this 65-year-old client is capable of doing these. So these positions, we start with a bag. Any kind of sandbags are great. I like the Alpha Strong sandbag just because it has more handles on it. So you start with it vertical. You'll basically address the bag by stepping over it or straddling the bag, grabbing your handles, sling onto the shoulder, and I call it the boombox position. You want your arm up over the top, so you're listening to your boombox as you carry. That'll keep their shoulders from slouching down. So you notice here, they're doing pretty okay, staying upright, and as soon as they start to struggle, I'll say boombox, and they have to throw their arm up, okay? Alternating sides as they go down, they dump it, they have to do a proper pickup, sling to the other shoulder, carry it all the way back. So we get some good opportunities to practice that. Bear hugs. These 2 clients, both shoulder and neck injuries. So pretty light weights. They're carrying 20 or 15-pound sand balls. So they're squishy. They have to pick up the ball. They do a little overlap in the hands, and they pull it into their sternum. So it's not a Zercher carry where the weight's sitting down on your bicep and you're hugging it. The weight is direct to your sternum and you're pulling in. Anytime we're doing a bear hug or a Zercher, keep it off their diaphragm. That's not going to feel comfortable pulling into their sternum, into their diaphragm or into their belly. So we want it up on the bone as they pull in there, okay? So they hug in, again, anti-shrug, working on their shoulders, crossing the arms, hug and hold tight as they go along, again, limiting a lot of swaying, drifting, and so forth. All right, here's our fister carry. So Joe's demonstrating the fister carry. Anytime you program in some arms and then include this, it's like people, they get so upset because they know how hard it is. Carrying a weight directly over your head can be extremely challenging. He has a 35-pound plate there, I think. And you'll see as he gets tired and he keeps going, it's getting wobbly. The elbows are starting to break down a little bit. So as we're going, I'm coaching. I'm like, you got to reach up, Joe. You got to reach up. That's our biggest cue, constantly reaching. As soon as their elbows start to buckle, have them go to a 90-degree carry where it's just right over their head. So now we're working with our angles as they start to get tired. Shoulder issue clients that cannot do overhead positions yet, we call it a steering wheel grip. So that's what Craig's doing behind. Holding that 9 and 3, holding in here tight, squeezing your elbows in. So we'll cue this like you're holding a bushel of grapes underneath your arms and you're squishing the grapes in tight, holding on here tight as you carry. And again, as the clients will go, I'll come by and feel their arms. I want to make sure they're engaging, not just letting the weight sit on them as they carry, okay? Unilateral drags, bilateral drags. Huge fan of dragging weights. This is Jerry here, 75 years old, has his first hip replacement coming up in 2 weeks, has a knee issue, a broken clavicle that he has not had repaired. I don't think he's going to. He's one of those super bitter old guys that's just like, I'm fine, I can take it. He was in Vietnam. He's just a tough guy. And so between his wife and I, kind of riding him and my experiences with my hips, he agreed to get a hip replacement. So part of that we noticed with him was extreme unilateral dominance, one side that he is just so much stronger on than the other. So to be able to work on that, we started doing some drags and carries, suitcase carries, of course, but drags in this position. He had so much muscular development on one side, you could see it. You could see the erector muscles on his right side were twice as big and stuck out than on his left side. So we really wanted to address that in these positions. Again, does gardening with his wife, likes to be outside, likes to go hiking, so we want to be able to work on these things as we go. A great way to teach this is if I were recording you and you were coming into view, the first thing that I should see are your cheeks, not your head. This is called an inertial lean. This is called a muscular drag. So we want people to sit into like a quarter squat and drive with their flat foot, heel dominant drive, not just lean back and let gravity take them. As they start to get tired, you have to continually cue that. Hips first, get into position as they drag, okay? Higher risk of injury due to overload. We do have the opportunity with clients that continually develop. If you hand them a kettlebell and say, carry this, they'll always put it in the same arm if they're not thinking about it, okay? When you know you're being assessed, you default to proper everything. Anybody know of a company called Fleet Feet? It's a shoe store. So when you go into Fleet Feet and they say, oh, you want some shoes? Let's see you run. And you're like, right here in the store in front of everyone? And they go, yeah. And so you go running off with this like prim and proper technique. And I'm watching my wife. I'm like, you don't run like that. And she's like, Mary Poppins run a lot. She looks perfect. And I'm like, when you're out there, you're like half dying and you're slouching over. When we know we're being assessed, we default to what we think that people want us to do. So we don't really perform what we would normally do. That's why I call it a movement observation and not an assessment. It's just kind of built into workout number one. We just kind of put it out there and say, oh, let's work on our hinges. Let's see you do a step up. Let's see you do this. And I'm watching to see what they naturally do. So in the same thing here, if I were to just hand someone a weight and say, carry this outside for me and come back and grab 3 more, they're probably going to carry in the exact same arm every time. So because of that overdevelopment, we might have years or a lot of work to try to even them out or to get them close to being even again, okay? We have some clients that the alternating steps and the pressure bothers their knees a little bit. Usually it's ACL injury clients or meniscus clients. So we will do a simulated drag. These are Supermans connected to a post, and so she keeps constant engagement, and there's no point does she not have tension on her. So either though she's switching legs, there's constant tension. There's no moment of follow through as you drag from one foot where the bag stops for a second as you shift. There's constant tension. So this gives us a good opportunity to work on quad dominance, which is what I want with this client in particular. She has very strong hamstrings, and the overdevelopment of one quad versus the other was why her meniscus was injured in the first place. So we're teaching her to engage both of these, to walk against that resistance, and then to deload it as she comes back, and she can control how hard she wants that to be as she moves out. Small, choppy steps. Again, inertial drag, make sure she's moving her butt first. Head and chest up, shoulders are engaged, the arm looks good, no bouncing, okay? Keeping her in there nice and tight and doing well. 15 minutes, we're hanging in there. All right, proper returns, or what we call the replacement, okay? This is where a lot of the frustrations as a coach comes in. You'll probably see this. You'll ask a client, go grab a red kettlebell and come back. And they'll go over, and they'll bend over, and they'll grab the weight, and they'll carry it over, and you're like, do 10 squats. Oh, I know how to do perfect squats. And they do their 10, and then they come back, and they're like, I'm done. So they did a bad bend over. They weren't warmed, properly positioned. We call it a proper pickup, not just a pickup. So they were exposed there. Then they did their carry, probably incorrectly. They weren't thinking like exercise is on, so they're like, I just got to get over here. And then they do their proper squats, and then they carry it back and bend over. So the return is just as important as the pickup. And my clients even mock me. They're like, Robert, I'm properly putting this back, as they strut over and put it down. How did that look? And I'm like, great. If I'm the little angel on your, or the devil on your shoulder, whatever one I am to you, if I'm that person that's always in your head, I'm doing my job. So when you're at home picking up anything, whatever it is, and you're 1/2 of a second to just unlock your hips before you bend over, right? To get into a proper hinge position, I've done my job. I want my annoying voice, as I'm a very annoying person, I guess. I want my annoying voice to be in your head to remind you of these things, okay? So when we properly return things, they will be from overhead, they will be at shoulder height, they will be off the floor typically. In our training program, you're gonna notice in the 6 components, the 6 pillars, and we started with that for a second. I'll show it again at the very end, if you'd like to take a picture of it. You'll notice for this specific demographic, we do not have horizontal pushing. Out of that 168 hours, I only get 2. This is not a huge priority for me. Doesn't mean that we don't do it, we just don't do it every single day. I know the priority I need is more rowing, mostly posterior dominant movements. And knowing that's such a priority, I will either 2-to-1 it versus everything else, or even 3-to-1 it versus everything else, depending on the client and how their bodies work. So we will posteriorly dominate and posteriorly load our programming specific to that goal. Because can you think of anybody that's too much posteriorly dominant? Can you think of anyone, that couldn't benefit from more rowing? Or I could think of a ton of people that have done too much bench press and sit-ups and leg lifts and all their 80s, Rocky workouts that they did that has left them in this position, right? And I'm not gonna blame it all on that, because there's awareness that you need for your posture, but it's not helping them, okay? So we purposely don't have that in there. 40% of our clients, pretty much, for our clients, it's 100%, but 40% of older adults, they're gonna develop that kyphosis, so the rounding of the shoulders as they come in. Challenge can be pressing overhead. So I won't get too deep into this, but we have a basic little assessment we'll do with a client, where we have them laying on the floor, laying on a bench, and we'll just ask them to passively reach their arm over their head and touch their thumb to the floor and come back. And if they're capable of doing that, but when we stand them up, they can't. For the most part, we know it's not a mechanical issue of the shoulder. We know that it's a muscular issue that can't get their arm into position. Now, if they're laying down on the bench or on the floor and you see them avoid the catch, they come back and they cheat around something, or they're waiting for it and you see their face, I got through it, there's an impingement issue, there's something going on structurally at the shoulder. We're probably not gonna fix that without physical therapy. So I don't want you to just feel like, look, we're just gonna force this. We don't. Okay, we have clients that have 2 severely frozen shoulders that we get them to press overhead, but this takes years to do so. So progression is really important, but this can be one of our biggest challenges. I speed dated, I call it speed dating, because I went to meet a lot of different physical therapists until I found the guy. And I'm in love with this guy. His name's Dan McLean. He's fantastic. He helped me with my hips. He's helped me with my back. He helped my wife with her knee surgery afterwards. Probably out of our 110 clients, probably 60 of them have gone to him for at least one initial assessment. And then he will send me a report that says, here's what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Let's see him back in 6 weeks, or just do this and you should be fine, right? And so it's just a basic little something to give me some direction. But I defaulted to the proper person to do that. So I'm not outside my scope, but if I'm watching what they do and what we do, they have bands, we have bands, they have boxes, we have boxes, we have barbells, we have all the same stuff. I know how to coach all that. I just don't know what's making their shoulder better or worse, right? So I get that person to help me. We have a behavioral counselor we work with. We have a registered dietitian we work with. We have the right team. I just plug in what they ask me to do, what they tell us to do, okay? So those individuals, overhead pressing can be one of the biggest challenges. Make sure you're programming it right based on the proper person. Deltoid strength, large areas of range of motion. Basically, this comes in because I'm a fan of shoulder raises. I know this can be a hot topic in our industry. Some people love them, some people don't. I think there's a huge benefit to working 45, 90, 180, 135 degrees range of motion of the shoulder in front raises, lateral raise, Ys, Is, Ts, Ws, inverted, empty cups, supinated, full cups, whatever variations you can give them to develop the deltoid strength needed, plus your range of motion work on the floor will eventually lead to, hopefully, them pressing their arm all the way overhead, okay? So I think those are important. This is one of the most beneficial exercises I've seen, this one over here in just a second. Wes had two shoulders that were not working well, and I'll talk about levers here in a second. This post, we call it a post press, actively pushing with this arm into the post, activates the rhomboids on both sides, locking this shoulder blade in place, allowing the other shoulder to pull on that musculature as it would in a bilateral press, but not having both arms go at once. Clients, and that might have been a lot, but clients can struggle with a bilateral press because one shoulder is restricting them. So if you activate the other in a passive angle, they're not pressing overhead, they're not struggling, so they can actively push. Shoulder blades activate, rhomboid activates, scapulas are both locked in. The locked position we need to then press overhead, they can practice unilaterally, each one of these doing it. And then eventually, if we get to the point where we bilaterally press, we will. We don't. I really don't have any clients bilaterally press. Even our power lifters don't do it, okay? So this has been one of the biggest, I wish I could remember the therapist that taught it to me. It's like 3 years ago at a NorCal state clinic, and it's been such a huge impact for us of getting our clients there. Some other variations, I love lever work. So the body basically being built up of levers, working against another lever, as we know in our levers and pulleys and so on. The more levers you add, the easier the movement will be. So for individuals that have a hard time pressing weight overhead, we'll lever their body into a lever landmine on this side and allow them to work the two angles together. And then once we get to a point where they're ready to add strength, we can either load the bar or add a progressive resistance band to it. Okay, some other clients, it's just coordination issues that come up. So one of our golfers, he's retired military, so he's got all kinds of back and foot issues going on. His son's a pro long-range golfer. He's a long driver. So we will coordinate and kind of put in some different angles of pull, some different coordination exercises, but still working this lever to get him to a point where he's able to press and reach his arm overhead. Okay, aviators, front raise, lateral raise, alternating as we go up, gives them a little bit of something to focus on once they learn these patterns, okay, to build into that point. And then this is one of my favorite. We call it a take it, leave it. Client takes a seat, re-engages, comes up, takes the weight, comes down, deloads, re-engages, comes up, leaves the weight. So she's able to practice this replacement position. And we can adjust the height of that pad to have her reach further overhead or lower. Okay. So all kinds of different angles of pushing. Now some of our rows, again, not all exactly horizontal. We have all kinds of angles that we work. We have pulleys that we put up. Oh. What happened? Austin, help me. I go too quick. Get these guys running. So angle of pull here. We have pulleys over on this side. Let me jump back one more here. Pulleys on this side with bags. Oops. Pulleys on here with bags as they row up. Have a little inertial lean here. Okay, so yes, we're seated, but if they don't engage and keep their core tight, the bag, the weight will pull them forward. So their core is having to activate, push against the floor to keep them in this position. So we're working different bags loaded there. Our second one, all kinds of different angles of pull here. We call these pull starts. So similar like pull start in a lawnmower, okay? We'll be able to double up different bands for them, work on different shoulder positions, angle of pull with even feet, split feet. We'll have them squat and go into it as you'll see on the next one. I love pulling. I like being creative with our pulls. Okay, single arm pulls from overhead, unilaterally here. Okay, work on a different shoulder position on this side. We have different angles of pull, bands, seated, shoulder retractions first and then working into their horizontal rows, different tensions on that one. Okay, some of our other ones here, just your traditional dumbbell row here, squat into a row, different tensions. Notice I have it hooked to a strap down here, so there's a little more give to it. Okay, you have to keep constant tension on that band, or else the strap at the bottom will pull it back. Okay, one of my favorite things to do. Okay, you also see, this is one of our split stance exercises. Both clients eventually at some point are gonna need knee replacements. So you'll notice the band assistants up here deloading them as they step up. They're not just doing pull downs, they're deloading their knees as they step. Okay, that's another talk maybe someday. Single arm rows into here, okay, your traditional rows. We'll do these from 4-point, we call it the 6-point, but you'll be on both knees, both hands, both toes. Okay, getting rows from that position. We'll go into a 2-point, a single point, and so forth, okay? So all kinds of different rows, all kinds of different angles that you can pull and press and transfer from. Okay, the bottom line is we want clients to be able to, number one, have a lot of fun, as Colin said this morning. Have a lot of fun with your programming. Be creative. We get clients to do the same workout 2 or 3 days in a row. Okay, they get bored. It's no longer a physical challenge to them. It's no longer a mental challenge to them. So I'm going to create and change things every single time they come in. But what we have to have is the recipe for creating the right program. We have to have the blueprint. This is my blueprint. We have an implement, tracking, and or balance coordination. I believe those two things work together very well. Okay. If you want more info on that, just YouTube my page, you'll see it. I have like 60-minute presentations on all these. They're all just sitting there. The hinges we talked about today, presses, raises we talked about, rows we talked about, split stance, lunges, step ups, anything where your feet are split, walking, running, jogging, sprinting, eventually going up from there, and then all of our loaded carries here at the bottom. So if I were to come in and ask you to create a workout for my client, you can look at this and say, well, I need one of these, I need one of these, I need one of these. I need at least one from each of these categories. But you can pick whatever you want out of here. Once you've taught all these to your clients, it gives you something, a teaching point of, well, we've gone through this column, let's progress them to the next. Some clients will be able to do them all, some might not, right? But it gives you some direction on what you can and can't do with your clients, what goals you have to progress them. And once we get to that point, they're a blank slate. It's open season. You can program whatever you want. It doesn't mean that we just get to the hard stuff and stay here. I can make simple exercises over here extremely difficult. That's where your volume controls come in. Reps, sets, loads, okay, your tempos, your recovery periods, your split intervals. Are we gonna superset? Are we gonna triset? Are we gonna tear down? Are we adding progressive reasons? You can be as creative as you want. So to steal a Cosgrove analogy, I need to know how to make cookies. I need to cook them for 12 minutes, they need eggs, and they need whatever it is, and when they're done, they need to cool. I have the recipe, but afterwards, I can add caramel, I can add ice cream, I can put whipped cream, I can create whatever I want out of it. I can dress it up as pretty as I want. But there has to be a way for me to show that I'm producing an appropriate program that's specific to my clients and it's working. So we've built something, we've done it, we've tested from the beginning, you retest at the end, and now you know I have a product that's working, it's showing reliable results. And if it's not, then you start to upkeep it, you start to improve it. But if it is, you've got something to work with, and you continue to fine hone that down. Okay, I have 6 or 7 of these before I got to this one. And every year or two from going to these events, I learn a little bit more, and I fine-tooth comb this all the way down to exactly what I want, to what I believe at this moment is the best programming I can offer my clients. And now when I hire new employees, when I bring in interns, I have something to teach them from. We have a great tool for our SOP binder to exactly show how they go. When new clients come in and they're skeptical, because most clients are, they've been hurt from a bad trainer who watched themselves in the mirror too much, who were eating soup while they were training, who overcharged them, who hurt them, right? These are all real stories. So when those situations come up and you bring this out and you're like, here's exactly what I'm gonna do with you. Here is my blueprint. Here is my philosophy. Here's exactly how I'm gonna progress you. That's impressive. It shows me that you care about what you're doing, that you put thought into it, that there's progression. You're not just making stuff up every day I come in. That's a true professional in my opinion. So again, just find a way to pull inspiration from this. Don't copy it. I want you to build your own. Okay? It's got to be specific to you. But most of us, we have it rattling around up here. We just haven't put it down on paper yet. We haven't built a continuum for it just yet. Okay? This is an older adult series that I did with OTP. These are all free. Again, I can send them to you, send you links if you would like. And here's all my contact information. Our website on here for Be Stronger, training the older adult, and so on. my lovely family, my supportive family that I have there. Anything that I can do to help you out, please feel free to contact me. Facebook, Instagram, our website. I'm here to help you. I appreciate your attention. Excuse my voice, but thank you very much for the attention. Appreciate it.